Good day everyone, here you see my two General Electric Model 3-5979C handheld CB radios from 1995 and 1996. About a year ago, I made a project of trying to find out some more information about these radios. Mainly, I wanted to try and, as accurately as possible, find when these were introduced to market and when they were discontinued from market. And also, if you don't remember, there were actually two variations of these radios, the first being the 3-5979A, which had 3 watts of power and a headphone jack, and then the second model, the 3-5979C, which had 4 watts of power, and instead of a headphone jack, it had an external antenna jack. And I also wanted to try and find when the A model was replaced with the C model, because I don't believe they were ever manufactured at the same time. That was about a year ago, and I did find quite a bit of information. What I did was I went around on eBay, found a bunch of listings for these radios, and I basically just asked sellers what type it was, whether it was an A or a C model, if I couldn't see for myself, and what the date code and serial number information on the bottom read. And I was successful in finding quite a bit of information. Now this video is going to be kind of weird because I actually already filmed this video over a year ago. However, it had a few factual errors, and while I did correct those later in the video, it just made it kind of awkward to watch, not a very good video. And it just sat halfway through the editing phase for the past year, and just now I've decided to scrap part of it and refilm it, which is this. So this video is going to be kind of weird in that about halfway through you're going to see the background all of a sudden change because what you'll be looking at is the part that I originally filmed a year ago. First of all, the first thing I discovered is that on these C model radios, while the date code seems to be a pretty reliable indicator of when the radio was made, for example my 1995 unit here, date code is 5527M, second 5 means 1995, and the 27 means the 27th week. And on my 1996 unit here, date code is 3601M, 6 meaning 1996, 01 meaning the first week. And it seems that across all of the C model radios, that seems to hold pretty good. So for C models, the date code's a pretty reliable indicator of when the radio was made. For the A models, however, the date code is not, and I'll explain why in a few moments. Something cool I found is that on any electronic device, at least almost any electronic device, that has an FCC ID code on it, you can actually go to the FCC's website, and they have a database search thingy where you can put in an FCC ID and it'll tell you information about it, like when it was registered and stuff like that, and it's really cool. Well, if you look at the bottom of these radios, this is on all 3-5979 radios, there's the FCC ID right there. It's G9H3-5979. G9H is what's called the grantee code, and 3-5979 is what's called the product code. And I plugged that code into the FCC's ID database, and I actually got some information. And the FCC certification for these radios was granted in 1992. So that's when these particular radios were introduced to market. It was in 1992. Now, regarding the data manufacturer, this is where the A models get kind of weird. If you look, I have an Excel spreadsheet here filled with date codes of radios that I found on eBay. I have A models up here and C's down here. And if you look at the A models here, now we know that the radios were introduced in 1992, but if you look at the date codes, the second number is either 0 or 1, which if you go by how the date codes work for the C models, that would mean that there were A models produced in 1990 or 1991. Well, that's not right, and I know GE's consumer electronics business well enough to tell you that these date codes are not as human readable as these date codes. These date codes, whoops, for the C models, they're straightforward. The A date codes are not. So if you have an A model, you can't go by the date code. But here's something really cool I found. If you take a look at the serial numbers, the first number of the serial number, like look at the C models here, the first number of the C models is the same as the second number of the date code. So if you have a 1995 unit, the serial number starts with 5. If you have a 96 unit, starts with 6. And I assume the rest of the numbers are the number of radio that was produced that year. So if we look at my 5527M unit, it was unit number 57,000 in sum, produced in 1995. And at the beginning of each year, they would reset it. So my 1996 unit here was unit number 3355, produced that year. So that's really cool. And if you look at the A models here, that holds as well, because as you can see, all the A models, the serial numbers, begin with either 2 for 1992 or 3 for 1993, and I imagine there are some 1994 units as well. So if you have a C model, you can still go by the date code to decode the date, but whether you have an A model or a C model, you can also go by the serial number, and that's pretty cool. These are one of the few General Electric consumer electronics products that have an easily decodable date code. Other information I found, I have a list of it here. From what I have found with my own research, the A model was replaced with the C model in 1994. And of course, as to when these radios were discontinued and replaced with the 3-5980, well, the 5980 came out in 1997, so I would assume that's when the 5979 was discontinued. Something else I thought was interesting, you've heard me say before that I think anyway, the technology that these radios use is actually kind of primitive, especially for their time. General Electric chose to use a mechanical rotary knob to choose the channels and a manual push button to activate the LED display. Most radios of this radio's time, and actually most radios made well before this radio, used an electronic push-button control for the channel selection, and they had a circuit that automatically activated the LED display when you transmit or receive. So this radio really, technology-wise, is well behind most other modern handheld CB radios. But I did some more research, and this radio, actually replaced, which was called the 3-5976, which was sold from the mid to late 1980s, which was quite a few years after most makers of handheld CB radios started incorporating the electronic features I mentioned into their radios. That radio was incredibly primitive. First of all, it was only capable of 3 channels. It came with 1 channel, and you could add the other 2 with crystals. I mean, my God, most people using CB radios hadn't had to deal with crystals since like the 1970s. And here was this radio made, until the late 1980s, and it was only capable of 3 channels and used crystals, so that was extremely primitive. It had no digital display at all, unsurprisingly, and it was only rated for 3 watts of output power and 4.5 watts of input power. That's what I like about some CB radios, was the manufacturer actually gave you the input power and the output power. And the reason was way back in the old days of CB radio, of course the FCC had a law on how much transmit power a radio could have. Back in the old days, they measured that power through the input. And so a CB radio was only allowed to have up to 5 watts of input power when you transmit. And then in the 1970s or 1980s, they changed that law so that transmit power was measured at the antenna. And so they measured the output power instead of the electrical input power. And they changed it so CB radios were only allowed up to 4 watts of output power instead of 5 watts of input, which still made sense. The radio that this radio replaced, the 3-5976, it actually stated on the box that it was rated for 4.5 watts of input power and 3 watts of output power. So of course any circuitry is not 100% efficient, so it used 4.5 watts of power to output 3 watts of radiation, which makes sense. With that being said though, some CB radio manufacturers started taking advantage of the way the FCC had changed the law on how output power was measured. So oftentimes what some CB radio manufacturers would do they would state how much power the radio was, but they would state the input power, and yet they wouldn't tell you. Radio Shack actually did this with many of their handheld CB radios. One notable model I remember is the TRC-222. It was a pretty common radio. You can find them on eBay usually. It was made throughout the 1990s. And Radio Shack was quite dirty in how they marketed that radio. In the advertisement, they said it was full power, full 4 watts of power. But when you looked at the fine print of the actual power specifications, that was 4 watts of input power. The TRC-222 is only rated for 2.5 watts of output power. So that's quite dirty. That they would call it, and I quote, they said full power, which would make you think it was the full legal 4 watts of output power. But no, it's only 2.5 watts, and that's on high power. With that being said, I wonder, these radios are kind of funny in that the older version, the 3-5979A, is stated as having 3 watts of power on the box, and then the newer model here, the 3-5979C, was rated for 4 watts of power on the box. Looking at the box here, you can see that they explicitly state 4 watts output power at 13.8 volts DC input. So they actually say output power. They even put it in bold here. 4 watts of output power. But knowing what I knew with the Radio Shack advertisements and stuff, I wasn't sure whether or not to believe that these radios indeed have the full 4 watts of output power. So I tested it with both of these radios. I hooked it up in series with my multimeter on a 12-volt battery to measure current while transmitting. And the current readings I got were very high. As a matter of fact, I was wondering if the radio circuitry was perhaps playing games with my multimeter. But I tried it with both of these radios on all 3 of my multimeters. In addition to a 12-volt power supply, I tried it with a 12-volt battery, and the readings I got were consistent. In addition, to test if these really did use that much current, I put a rather high-powered 12-volt incandescent light bulb in series with them and transmitted, and that light bulb lit up very bright. So indeed, these were using that much power at the input. The readings I got on high power, these radios input about 10 watts of power. That's transmitting on high power. On medium power, the input power is about 6.5 watts, and on low power, the input power is about 4.5 watts. Given these readings, and assuming that they are indeed correct, my conclusion would be, first of all, these radios have a horribly inefficient transmit circuit. I can't imagine that's constant across all handheld CB radios, because I've seen advertisement for radios with 2.5 watts of output power with only 4 watts of input power. That's let me do a quick calculation here. That's an efficiency of 62.5%. But with these radios, if they're using 10 watts of power to output 4 watts, that's an efficiency of only 40%. So my first conclusion is that these things have a really inefficient design. I don't know if that's because they were poorly designed, or if it's because efficiency decreases as output power increases. I don't know. But my second conclusion is we can probably believe the box when it says that these have 4 watts of output power. I wish I had some sort of power meter that I could hook up to the external antenna jack to measure output power that way, but given how much input power that these radios use when transmitting, I would believe that these are indeed a full 4 watt power radio. I just noticed something interesting on this box. Even though this box is for the C model, they actually use a 3-5979A for the picture here. You can see there they have a headphone jack instead of the antenna jack. Something I mentioned in the video when I first got this radio from eBay, I mentioned how the LED display is quite a bit dimmer than the display on mine. I'm just thinking now, see, the display on mine is so bright that some of the other sections of each digit light up only slightly, you know, kind of power leakage over to other segments. So I'm just wondering if, since this radio here is newer, I'm wondering if the manufacturer took notice of that and purposely, you know, increase the resistance of the resistors going to the LED display or something like that to purposely make it dimmer, because of course on this display the segments don't have that bleed over of light or electricity probably even onto other segments. But at any rate, I do prefer the bright display. It's easier to see outside. But just something I wonder. A couple of other differences I noticed between the A models and the C models is the case molding is actually slightly different, where the headphone jack on the A models is of course smaller than the antenna jack on the C models. The C models actually had this little square part, the square molding here where the jacks are. It had to be enlarged for the antenna jack to fit. You can see here they enlarged it to the left a little bit so the big jack could fit. Also, interestingly, on the top here, where on the A models the squelch is marked squelch, on the C models it's marked range. And the font of the knobs here is different than the ones on the A models. The A models have this kind of thinner, more industrial looking font. And the C models have kind of a friendlier looking font and bolder. And also where the C model, the extremes of the squelch is marked either local or distant, on the A models it's marked minimum or maximum. You can see the min and max there. Also, the A models, or at least some of the A models, were made in China, whereas the C models, or at least some of the C models, were made in Malaysia. Alright, I think that's everything I wanted to cover here. I think to end this video, I'll take one of these radios outside and we'll run it for a while and see if we can pick up any chatter. Nutty big talkers.
Take care. Dragon Station, Houston, Texas. I'm standing down. I'm clear.
Roger that, buddy. What channel is that on? It's on 11. I like Roger beeps. I'm surprised other more radios didn't have them built in. That actually sounds like the same type of beep that NASA used to use. Yeah, that's definitely a NASA beep. That's what NASA used to use. It wasn't meant as a Roger beep, but it signaled the radio towers on Earth to start transmitting up to whatever was in space. Yeah, that's the NASA beep. That's cool.
That's my Roger, yeah, you got some mean big boys out here. That body snatcher about to get to the house. I know I'm about to go 10-7 when body snatcher make it to the house, cause doggone, he flips his truck over in the ditch. He tried to set my house on fire, so I had to get up, pack up, and move out. Right,
That guy's on bath salts or something.
that's my Roger, yeah, I'm standing down. Go get out there, yeah. Hey, yeah, take care, bro. God bless, long time no hear. Yeah, go life for John. Trying to hit me and run as he couldn't get in there. I heard him in there. He don't think I heard him, or
Bit of something. Big talker on channel 16, the emergency channel. Nobody abides by the rules anymore. I don't think even the FCC cares about the CB rules anymore. Some distant chatter on 19, the main channel. Anything else? That's 25. And that's what I don't get, is the guys who yell the same phrase or word over and over and over. What else do we have? Anything on 6? That's the main crazy channel. Nothing on 6 right now. It's on 22. I couldn't hear over the cars, but I don't think that's English. It's probably Mexican. CB's popular down there. Or not Mexican. Whatever they speak in Mexico, I forget what it is. Well, I think that's all I'll bother with here. It's cool outside, it's windy. So I think I'll pack up and go in. Thanks for watching, and see you guys later.